everyone. I'm Sky Canaves. I'm a senior analyst at eMarketer, where I cover the digital transformation of retail, marketing, and consumer behavior. And I'm really happy to be joined today by Devin Johnson, who's the founder and CEO of BRANDefenders. And that's a full-service brand management firm. And to kick us off, I want to hear a little more about what you do at BRANDefenders and what your background is.
Thanks, Sky. It's a pleasure to be here and appreciate Lively and Grit Daily House having us out. So BRANDefenders is a concierge brand development and rep management agency. It started on the premise that a lot of agencies were being very narrow and niche focused on what they would offer to organizations. And what would tend to take place is that when you'd work with an agency, a lot of times the expected value or the KPIs that really would be scoped and the things offloaded to those agencies would tend to be very narrow focused. It would conflict with some of the internal staff, some of the internal endeavors that were taking place. And you were introducing new silos, new areas in which you would try to market the business, but you'd actually fragment the messaging and create more work long term for a cohesive brand that was very authentic to the market. And so as we built several organizations over the years and really had kind of endeavored in our entrepreneurial journey, one of the things that we found was that we could bring a set of skills that allowed us to really fundamentally go under the hood of these businesses and really learn what their value proposition was. And to sit and work with the thought leaders, work with the staff, understand the market segmentation, and put together more of a strategy that was based on intelligence that then drove sound strategies, and then where needed would allow us to plug our team in to outsource some of that execution so that it was a more holistic package. And that's where the concierge style service came.
Great. Now, here at South by, brands have such a big presence and become more and more important in how they market themselves. And I wonder, what are some of the learnings that individuals can take from brands, and how is your work working with brands applicable to individuals who need to manage their presence online?
Yeah, it's a great question. So how many, by show of hands here, have started a business, grown a business, or are looking to grow one? Okay, so entrepreneurialism is alive and well here with us in Austin. Now, when we think about the subject of how the top 1% manage their brands online, a lot of times we start thinking, okay, the top 1%, it's a filter. You're segmenting by a financial status based on assets and some type of influence. When we look at what that market is, and you start thinking based on the US standard, it would be about $540,000 in annual income. Does that mean that if you make $500,000, you're not in the top 1%? Well, statistically, yes. But does that mean that you still have influence? In most cases, yeah. Right? Those individuals may have their own brand that's just as impactful to the organization they represent as the top 1%. So let's set aside the topic of what the top 1% is doing. And let's think about those of us who are trying to build a business. We've already built a brand. That brand might be our corporate name. But when we have our personal name, that's also now representative of us, and it's connected to the organization. And so what are those things that those individuals or those brands are doing? Most of them are much more intentional with how they curate content online. I think most of us, it's pretty safe to assume that most of us have a social media profile. Most of us have posted pictures from a family trip with information about where we were or what we were doing and why it's exciting to us. But not all of us have intentionally thought through, what is the market that I actually apply myself towards? What is my skill set? What is, if I'm going to be authentic in my genuine self on what my skills might be or what I'm trying to kind of grow myself into, what market is that, and what would they like to hear, or what do they need to learn? And if we start thinking that way, like the top 1% do more often than not, we can align the curation or the generation of our content to be much more meaningful to getting more followers that are actively and interested in what it is that we're doing. And then the dominoes start to fall for some of the other things that I'm sure we'll get into.
So it's almost like a customer-centric approach, would you say, thinking about your
Very
market, who your audience is, and speaking to them more directly?
Yeah, Sky. I mean, one of the greatest things that we can do, both personally and within our businesses, is to align our message more authentically to the customers that we're trying to either gain or to keep. It's obviously a lot cheaper to keep customers than it is to attract new ones. And so part of that becomes developing operational feedback loops, having better customer engagement, and engaging in UGC or user-generated content to look at what your customers are saying about your brand online, and then listening to what they're saying, adopting some of those sentiments into daily practice, whether it be improving operational behaviors, customer service behaviors, or just simply looking at some of the questions, concerns, frustrations, or areas in which content needs to be developed, and then mapping that into our content strategy for ongoing content releases. So yes, very much being more intentional across the board.
And what do you see as the most important channels for doing this, for managing a presence online?
Yeah, so when you're looking at user-generated content, a lot of times you've got two arenas that people are playing in, right? You've got the review source sites or the forums, right, where people are going and creating very short snippets of perceptions about your brand, or a little bit more long-form material about the brand. And then you have social media where you can curate content. You can watch what's happening within the psychographics of kind of the illustrations of the messaging that you're putting out and what the engagement is, and really start to A/B test a little bit more what is being well received. And a lot of times you'll see that reception apply itself over in the UGC side of things, whether it be Quora or Reddit boards that start to light up. And really, ultimately, when you think about representing a brand from the rep management standpoint, a lot of times these organizations that really miss the mark are seeing that negativity appear on these Reddit boards. And as Google continues to advance its algorithm, it becomes that much more detrimental to their search results. And what I mean is, if you think of a brand that's going through maybe something like a crisis or something of that nature, it used to be simply that Reddit with the brand's name would appear in their search results. And if things weren't going well for that brand, then it would simply be a search landing page to threads about it. And now, more and more, as the search engines and the algorithms become much more personalized, and as the AI systems become that much more aware of who we are as a viewer, the content becomes more customized to your experience. So if you're interested in a different hobby or a different business or a different region than I am, your search result about the same company may actually highlight a different piece of user-generated content more relating to your interests within the same brand than mine will. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and so from a targeting perspective, what needs to be done to make sure that your content is reaching the right audience that has those interests?
So important. Yeah, so what you need to be doing as a brand, both personally and if we were to kind of liken it into the corporate space, is to start fundamentally with knowing who you are. Who is your business? Why are you in business? What is the purpose and the value proposition? And really go out from there. And when you do that, you can quickly identify your target markets. And then you need to understand those markets, because not all markets are in the same arenas, right? There are some industries where you could be an industrial cable and you could be selling through a wholesale channel network to installers or to suppliers. And those organizations, those procurement officers, are not necessarily looking for your glitz and glam on a graphical ad on Instagram or TikTok, right? And so knowing who your brand is and where your vertical really stands with regards to how you go to market will help shape where to curate that content and where you should be publishing it.
And what are some areas that tend to get overlooked in this process from your experience?
Most of the time it tends to be around the things we just covered, and that tends to be understanding who your brand is. Most of us, when we start a business, we look at what the product is we want to develop or the service offering that we want to go to market with, and we think that in and of itself is going to warrant a customer yield, or that we're going to gain customers as we go to market and start promoting our business, whether that be through paid ads or whether we organically optimize our site such that we're going to get those customers. The problem is people have so many choices these days that most services, most products are almost commoditized. And it's very hard to have true, distinctive, and disruptive IP anymore. And so when you start thinking about what it is that you're offering, you really need to understand why that is. Right? When I think about why I got into branding, I had built dozens of companies up until the point that I got pulled into rep management. And it wasn't until I really got into reputation management that I really kind of found my why. And that's embarrassing to say because a lot of those businesses before were very successful, millions and millions of customers. We have a wonderful track record of building organizations. However, I wasn't satisfied. I wasn't happy, Sky. And so when I start to think as an entrepreneur, as a business builder, as a father, what am I doing? And how can I help generationally my kids maybe make a little bit different decision? My why becomes, how do I help people find their purpose? I love, Sky, watching my team members find their spark. Sometimes that spark has been when one of our great account managers came to me and said, you know, I really have wanted to be a plumber. I've loved the trade. I've dabbled in it a little bit. I finally have this opportunity. We could not champion that individual any louder than we did. It was a celebratory event, and we're still very, very promoting of his choice today. That is what we need to be doing personally. It's what we need to be doing professionally. As leaders, as brand builders, as that top 1%, or those people trying to become the top 1%, we need to think about our why, because it intrinsically connects to the corporate business and the why or the purpose of that brand. And if you don't have a why, I know we say that a lot, right? The why, it's really the purpose, it's the lifeblood, it's the emotion behind your brand. I don't know why I'm getting feedback, so if you guys got that on your end, I apologize. But this is important to me, and I don't know if you just saw a shift in me, but I feel it, because this is what matters, guys. We're all here trying to make a buck. That's kind of why everybody wakes up and goes to work. It's not unique. We all do it for a purpose. But at the end of the day, once you've made that buck, why do you keep doing it? If you don't have that why, you're going to feel lost. And I've felt lost, but I don't anymore. And that's the beautiful part. And so when we work with an organization at BRANDefenders, more often than not, and I've come into organizations that were mom and pop, that were generationally handed off to children. I've worked with some multi-billionaires that sit here and just try to look for the next quick, great ramp-up business that they could just come in and make quick money on. But usually they're looking for personal advice on managing their brand, and then they pull us into the corporation. And what happens is they're a little caught off guard, Sky, when we start saying, okay, so you've told me about this fire online, or you've told me about this market you want to tackle, you've told me you want to go direct to consumer instead of through your distributors. What's your vision for 2024, 25, and so on? Why did you get into this business? Most get taken aback. They kind of sit and think, why is a rep management agency coming in and talking to me about my goals and my 4 disciplines of execution? Well, most don't really do the 40X model, and most don't think that way. But if we know ahead of time as an agency that an organization is or is not thinking in the correct ways, we can help shape that, which really becomes very apparent to their customers in our messaging that becomes more meaningful than just legacy content that was thrown up without real purpose. And so going back to the things that are missed the most, I want to make sure that I touch on your original question. The things that are missed the most is usually connecting passion and purpose with discipline and execution.
And then in terms of execution, it's a great point. One of the themes I keep hearing in the discussions, and one that we see in our research from a brand perspective, is a shift in investment interest from performance marketing to brand marketing, and really building up the brand. This is especially true in very competitive industries like fashion. We see that McKinsey had a poll where 70% of fashion executives said they plan to increase investment in that upper funnel brand marketing. But you can't do that in a vacuum, right? It needs to have a purpose that can drive the content that a brand produces. So how do you see the role of content evolving when it comes to personal brands? And what channels are best for communicating?
So if you're building a personal brand, you need to understand, or at least define personally, write it down on paper, create some goals that are actionable. What do you hope to get from the content you're generating? Right? A lot of times we think that we're just going to do a shotgun approach, and eventually enough shotgun pellets are going to make enough of a dent in the wall that the wall's going to fall down, or that we're going to reach the accomplished outcome. But we have to kind of think with the goal of the goal in mind. So why am I doing what I'm doing? It's to get to this goal. what's beyond that goal, right? One of my mentors, Richie Norton, wonderful individual. If you guys don't know Richie, you guys should look him up and follow him. Richie Norton put it best when he said, okay, how do we live beyond the goal of the goal? And what does that mean? If your goal is to build a massive following and you reach that goal, now all of a sudden you feel empty, don't you? Well, then you have to start over, and there's a new goal that you have to create. So what's the goal of that goal? Well, the goal of that goal is to drive my brand to where I can make $1 million a year in speaking gigs. Okay, that's the goal of the goal. What would $1 million a year in speaking gigs actually get you? What are you chasing? What are you really after? If you can think that way from the get-go, it's easier to back into the recipe of what's exactly needed than to continue chasing shiny things like a fish, hoping that eventually you'll actually reach the net result of the goal of the goal. So when you look at where you're going to create content, the answer, Sky, to where you want to create content is going to depend on really where you want to be in final cause, which is that living outside the goal of the goal. And when you live in that state, you can start to think, okay, the best way for me to accomplish final cause, or to get to the other side of all these goals, is to do all of these different things backing into that path that you've just created. And in some cases, Sky, you can get there by simply posting content on YouTube over and over, right? We talked a little bit beforehand with Spencer from the show, and we were talking about how my eldest son, he's 18 years old, he's a wonderful, wonderful young man, but he loves to live in video games online, which most do. I personally didn't growing up. It was a different generation. I'd rather have my hands in the dirt. But for him, that is his safe space. That's where he loves to be. And a lot of times we start thinking, well, why are you watching another kid play freaking video games? Just go play this dang video game. You have the console. And then what does he ask us, fathers? He's like, well, why are you watching the Super Bowl, Dad? Here's a football. Just go play the freaking game. Touche. Right? But my point is, if that's where you're comfortable, and if you're one of those people that doesn't like to feel comfortable getting on stage and talking to people about what excites you, put on a headset. Talk to other people like you. Post content online where you're going to get user-generated engagement that's authentic to you and who you are. And for him, that's him being a different individual than I am. I don't feel comfortable going and building video game-based YouTube videos, right? And so, but if that is your goal, and I start looking across the crowd here and I start thinking, okay, what's his goal? If his goal is to lead an organization and it's through speaking engagements, he needs to build thought leadership credibility. So it might be written blogs. It might be editorials or third-party publications where he's doing press releases about his upcoming events that he's going to be at to drive awareness. And so going back to that being authentic point, if you're authentic to who you are and you know what you want to become or what you want to do or who you want to change and what value you want to add, go in with that in mind. You have to be in a giving state, a giving mindset. It can't be all about taking. It shouldn't at all be about taking. Because if you're coming to actually contribute to an event like this, and I hope somebody takes something away from this, otherwise I'm just taking up your time. The goal should be to share something meaningful to someone. And doing that can be in a lot of different media forms. So try your hand at a lot of them.
And now I want to turn a little to some of the new technology that's the big talk of South by. You know, there's a new track on AI this year. And even in the tracks outside of AI, it seems it's such a recurring topic of conversation. What tools are there? How do you see the evolution of the new generative AI capabilities helping with that, both internally as well as in a public-facing way?
What a great question. How many of you guys here have used AI? GPT, some form, right? We've all kind of tested it. We've played with the images. All this, I mean, we've had funny images from our brand symbol is a cactus, right? And there's a lot of meaning behind a saguaro cactus and just cactuses in general, especially with defense. But we've had team members put a cactus on a rocket going over a moon, drinking a beer, right? So, I mean, AI has had a lot of fun, kind of creative elements to it. But when you start thinking of how AI can change your ability to brand yourself, and to build more awareness around your brand, your purpose, insulate or create your reputation. Right now, we're in a very early stage of AI development. The masses are now becoming aware of it, but AI is not new. How long have you guys been using Google? Long time. You know what Google uses for its algorithms? Machine-based learning, AI, right? So it's not new technology. Even OpenAI has been around for a very long time. It just didn't become commonplace until more recently. And so when you think about how AI can really benefit those of us that use it, you really go back to the fundamentals to say, if this is who I am, this is who my brand is, and this is where I want my brand to go, and here's kind of the steps to getting it there. How can I fast track through efficiencies or even economies of scale where human capital, human resources may not be available to us, the creation of copy or content in a way that allows you to fast track your marketing calendar and to really get a lot of posts generated quickly. The thing that we have to be mindful of, however, is that AI, where it has its place, it also doesn't have its abilities in all areas. And so I sit and think about the authentic self. You've obviously heard me in the last 15 minutes talk about the authentic self. AI does not have moral discernment. It loses that. It also doesn't have a really good ability yet to integrate optimization techniques. And so when you know your market, you can ask it more intelligent questions and get a better outcome, and you can regurgitate a different request after it gives you some feedback. But ultimately, at the end of the day, I look at AI as a wonderful tool that's allowed us to get maybe 80% of the way there on copy generation, or to get better insight and market aggregation across different data points than what it would take from a human standpoint to go through the old, Rolodex or the old indexes of all these different data systems. And, think of it as the old encyclopedia. Most of you guys aren't old enough to have encyclopedias inside your home, but I had cabinets of them. And I remember doing research papers on the old Encyclopedia M book, and it was like a yellow page. You guys don't even know what yellow pages are. But, okay, a couple of you. Okay, so when I think of AI, I think of AI as being more of the online searchability that Google afforded us versus going to the old encyclopedias to look up very quickly data and then to be able to ask for citations and kind of glean data. The thing that I would leave with you is that when you use these in your different market segments, when you understand your customer, look for point-based solutions that are AI-based. And these could be marketing tools, these could be analytical trackers, this could be just market segmentation or psychographic-based segmentation. Leverage those AI systems. Don't think GPT is going to be the be-all, end-all of AI. There's a lot of great tools out there that'll give you a lot of insights, a lot of audit data that helps you drive your focus on the content you're creating, the market you're going after. And in some cases, you might learn something that says, my business model is like 5 to 10 degrees off. And if I just adjust slightly based on this new AI data that I just gathered, I'm really setting myself up for a much quicker path to that final cause being on the other side of my goals, right?
Well, thank you so much, Devin, for sharing your inspirational insights on this topic. And thank you to Lively and Grit Daily and all of you for joining us. Thanks again.
Thank you.